Hey, just made it. Been changing the oil in the lawnmower. It being sunny again, it's time to mow the grass. I don't mow very often, once a week maximum, as I expect lots of you do too. We're all trying to be good and keep the grass for the insects and places for them to lay their eggs and for the larvae to overwinter and all this kind of stuff, which is actually very much where I wanted to be today. Hang on just a minute, I've got to get my notes up because I was thinking about things while I was doing gardening, and so I made myself a few notes, and I just want to have them around now, and then I should be okay to see how we're getting on. Yeah. As I expect you probably have seen, I've been very much into rewilding over the past few days. I mean, I always am. I've been into rewilding since forever. My dad and my uncle, who was a woodsman, were really into it. And that was way back in the 50s when people didn't even have the word rewilding and we didn't call anything that. But that's what they were about. It's like, let's do it Earth's way. And one of my other uncles was a really good gardener, the sort of bloke who used to win prizes for his prize marrow, which sort of looked like a spaceship, this sort of thing. And he was one of the first people in the county to start growing clematis. And that was quite a thing because they were new in the 50s for ordinary people. And Uncle really liked them, and so he had them growing over all sorts of things, growing all over the sheds and even over a couple of the chicken houses, which is a bit exciting because the hens like them as well. But it was all like, yeah, they're doing okay here, and the insects are using them. And that uncle, my gardening uncle, kept bees. He used to talk to the bees, and so I was taught that as well. And used to sit by the hives and talk to the bees about what's going on. Old country practice happening for centuries, millennia probably. Anyway, Uncle was of course very keen on anything that was going to help the insects and going to help his bees in particular. And that was Uncle Percy, and Uncle Jack as the woodsman. And he was really into the trees and how the woods worked and how all the plants worked. And they knew about what we call mycorrhiza now, the threads. Partly, of course, because that's part of the old ways teaching that they were all into, that they helped bring me up in. But also because people did know about things in those days. We were one of the first families to have a TV and one of the 3 families who actually had a car when we first went to the village, which was about 1955, 56. And they'd only just got mains water, and the house I lived in had its own spring, and we could still get the water on the spring, which was lovely, and nicer even then than the mains water. But the mains water was convenient, and we'd got it all around the village, and several of the farms had got it, but not all, because it was quite difficult to take the water out, right across fields or down, a mile of muddy track of grass growing down the middle of it. So we were much closer in that way to how nature worked. Houses were built in a particular place, at least partly because they had water, because there was a spring there and they could get water. You didn't have to hike along for hours and from forever to get water into your house. And the plants we grew, the only fertilizer we had was the compost that we made and muck from the farms or the horses. We didn't buy in. Gardeners didn't buy in. Only sort of posh blokes do, you know. But even so, the posh bloke in the big house above our village, he didn't. He had the farm as well, so he used to have muck from the farm, and he had horses, so he had muck from the horses as well. And we didn't. And when the first farm started to buy in fertilizer, there was such a to-do in the village. It was like everybody going down the pub, you know, and said, "Well, did you hear about Alfred? Do you know what he's done? He has, yeah, he has. He's bought the stuff, you know. Don't know what it'll do, but there, cost a bloody fortune too. And he's got all them cows and he's got all the mucks. I mean, I don't know what he's doing it for." And this was going on for weeks. I mean, it was still going on. People were still talking about it, whether or not you used fertilizer and how much you used fertilizer. When I came back in the holidays from university, which was in the 60s, in the mid-late 60s. So, you know, it isn't that new. Well, it is rather that new that we've been using fertilizer. It's, what, say 68, and it sort of stopped about then. So that was 50 years. Which isn't very long. And now, you know, we talk about organic and we talk about rewilding, which I'm always talking about when I'm not talking about other things, but I'm still talking about rewilding probably, even if it might be through other things. And we didn't have those words because it was normal. Everything was organic. You sort of got something, "Oh, it's got this foreign muck on it. I just want that or not?" So think about that, of how new it is. This world that to many of you probably who are quite a bit younger than me is like normal. And to me, I'm living across those worlds too. You know, we talk about walking between worlds, but I'm also living between the world where everything was organic, and it was very rare you got something that man-made fertilizer on it or something like that, and the world where you have to pay through the nose to get organic food. Such changes. But rewilding, I don't know how many of you went to the Scottish wildlife webinar last week on rewilding Scotland. And Peter Cairns was leading it. And it was very good. Scotland is really pushing for this. Even the government is sort of pushing towards this. There's lots of stalling and staggering and everything, but that's politicians, and that's how they are. They can't go straight at anything. And to commit to something means, well, what if it doesn't work? Then I'll lose my seat. And so on and so forth like that. But the Scots really are pushing towards rewilding. And they had some people on who are doing it in different ways. And there's one guy who's rewilding the seashore and the sea around Scotland and bringing back the native fish, things like native oysters. And I don't suppose you've ever seen a native Scottish oyster. Very few people have. There are hardly any of them about. But he's bringing us back. I hope he succeeds. I hope it goes mega and goes viral all around everywhere. And there's one pair of women who have got a small farm, a small holding, about 50 or 60 acres, I think it is, in the Cairngorms, on the edge of the Cairngorms. And they have decided to rewild their land and at the same time grow food for themselves and for the neighborhood, for the community in which they live. Now, that's what usually challenges the ordinary farmer and the ordinary person. Oh, well, if we go rewilding, we won't be able to grow any food, that'd be all for the blooming birds and things, and we won't get any. And there's lots of that kind of whinging and moaning going on. And these women have said, no, it doesn't have to be like that. I mean, they've got a huge, great example of Knepp down in Sussex, Isabella Tree's place, which is sort of thousands of acres and all that sort of thing. And she's a very good example, but she's also a bad one because, I mean, they're filthy rich, they're millionaires, and so they can afford to do it. And if it goes wrong, they're not going to die. If these two women, if it goes wrong, they could be in a bad way. It is truly their livelihood, both what they eat of themselves, and that is pretty nearly all what they grow, and what they are able to sell and barter with in the community. So they're a very good example. They've been doing it 3 or 4 years now, and it's called, cannot remember, Lindbreck Farm, I think it is, and I'll put the link up later. But they're fascinating, and they've got a good Facebook page, and they talk about it, and they do vlogs and things like that, so you can see the animals that they keep and the vegetable garden that they keep, and this amazing polytunnel they've got, which was built on Shetland for Shetland people and now gets sold everywhere. So I mean, if the wind can get that down, you haven't got a hope. It's probably hurricane. And they do get that kind of wind up in Shetland. No, it's superb, and if ever I get the money, I would love one. I would love one of those. It's really solid and beautiful and nice to work in. Anyway, let's get off polytunnels and polybreck, I think they call them. But let's get off those and back to the rewilding. And they've got a lovely little video which works, and I'll put that up for you to watch as well, because it really does tell you a lot quite quickly about them. And they said one of the things that they knew they had to do was sit on their hands. We hear a lot about climate change and sequestering carbon and extinction of species and growing more trees and all this kind of thing. And that's all about human intervention, humans doing something, humans changing things to help nature. I've always been chary about it. Not that I disapprove of trees, I adore trees and I know what they do, and it's quite totally stunning and amazing. But planting a new forest of, say, young birch and beech is not going to replace an ancient forest. Not for hundreds and hundreds of years. It can't, because trees don't grow that fast. And a little tree that's, like a sapling, and it's sort of about that, about that round, it can't pull in enough carbon. It just can't. It's not big enough. It hasn't got a big enough root system. It hasn't got a big enough branch system. It can't grow enough leaves to do it. Whereas, a 400-year-old oak, that can. But it's had 400 years. And it'll still be doing it at 1,200 years old. Yeah. So when they blast HS2 through and they cut down all these things that are old like that, this is what they're taking away. Now, those trees grew there, say in the HS2 forests. Those trees grew there naturally. They grew there because the birds planted the seeds. Jays are really good at planting oak seeds, acorns. And the wind blew the seeds there for those wind-blown trees. And they grew. And they grew because they could make it there. They grew because the conditions were right for them, for those sort of trees, in that situation at that time. And the first trees that come up are not the ancient oak permanent ones. I mean, they do, but they'll only be yay big. I've grown oaks. I've made it. I got one to make it to 20 feet, and that took me 30 years. And it was sort of only, but it was only a baby in that sense, as far as oak trees go. So they grow slowly, and they like to grow under somewhere that is camouflaged and hidden and helped a bit. And so the first things that will grow up are things like hawthorn or birch, and they will change the forest, and they will start bringing in undergrowth. I mean, they drop their leaves for a start, and those leaves are compost, and they grow more earth, and so they change things. And then the seeds of the wildflowers are blown in there or dropped in there by birds or whatever, and they grow in there, and they change the land. And it takes time. And when it starts, and this came out in that lovely little piece on monkswood that I was talking about the other day, and that is on my Wise Woman page, and I'll make sure you can see it again in the post after, in the comments on this post, because that was done 60 years ago. That was started. They left this, I think it's about 9 acres of wood, of field. It was ploughed field when they started. And they just left it alone. They didn't interfere with it. They didn't try and help it. They didn't plant more trees. They didn't take away what they thought were weeds. They didn't do anything. They just stood back and watched. And the guy who started it, he actually said at the beginning, I wonder what it'll do in 50 years' time. Well, now we know. It's a beautiful little woodland. It's a perfect ecosystem all on its own. And it was planted and nurtured by Mother Earth and by the birds and by the animals, not by humans. The earth tended it. The creatures tended it. The birds tended it. The insects tended it. And they got it right. But it took them 50, 60 years. Now we're all saying, panic, panic, panic. And yes, we should be panicking. But the answer to the panic is not rush out with armfuls of trees and stick them in any old bit of ground you can find. That is very often counterproductive, because unless somebody has really looked at the place, looked at what already grows there, and that's the way to look at the place, not doing pH tests and all that shit. It's actually looking. There's 3 or 4 baby oaks there. There's a hawthorn there. There's several birch trees there. Oh, there's a beech tree. Why did that get there? That's what the land wants to grow. That's what Mother Earth knows to grow. Not what humans who've got billions of degrees and PhDs and Christ knows what think ought to grow there. We have a problem. It's called climate change. It's called global warming. And we have the problem because of us, because of what we've done. And if there's any climate deniers out there, go away and play somewhere else, because you ain't going to like any of what I say. It is us. We have caused the changes. And we've caused them usually by being clever, by having a good idea and doing it. One of the reasons the Galapagos is in a mess, for instance, is that it has cats on it now. It didn't. But when, all the fabulous sailing ship heroes found Galapagos and Darwin went there and all this kind of shit, they had cats on the ship. They had to, brats. And some of the cats said, sod sailing. I'm fed up with it. This is all right. I can eat this and this and this and this. Did. And they got off and they stayed on the island and multiplied. And They've changed the wildlife, and some of it has gone extinct because of them. It's not the cat's fault. The cats didn't volunteer, they didn't sign on with the Navy. They were took by humans. Same thing on, I cannot remember which island, but I think it's in the Hebrides, and some lunatic took hedgehogs up there. Oh, how sweet. Nice little hedgehogs. They won't do any harm. They just decimated the seabird population by eating the eggs. Bright idea. Clever human. With the best of intentions. Wanting to do good. All of those things. Absolute shit. If you find yourself wanting to do good, feeling you've got a good idea, go and sit on your hands. Have a whole pot of tea all to yourself. And what do? Well, you don't just sit there and think about it. If you've got any sense, you'll have begun to think about asking Mother Earth, well, I think hedgehogs would be a good idea. What do you think? She goes, no! And you actually listen. So you don't do your bright idea. Possibly getting armfuls of tree saplings and bunging them in any old bit of land that you can find anywhere is a similarly daft idea. Has anybody who's doing it thought to ask Mother Earth what she thinks? Whether that's a good place? Or whether you should really be putting ash trees there? Doubtful. There will be some people who do it. I know them. And they don't put plants in the wrong place. But most people, they want to help. They want to make things better. They want to get over this frightful mess that we've caused. They want to plant lots of trees so they can absorb the carbon and Earth will be all right. And they'll be all right, which is one of the big drivers. But they don't bother to ask Earth. But if you rewild and you rewild properly, you make sure you do what the Earth wants you to do, not what you think is a good idea. And the best and safest way of doing that is to get out of the way, to leave the place alone, as they did with Monkswood. But it's difficult to do that in a lot of places. It would be nice to rewild our city parks, and there's a lot of ideas going on that, and I think it's a good idea. But we're going to have people in there as well, because the people will want to go and sit on the grass, watch the ducks on the pond or whatever. And if you put people in there as well, you have to be careful, and the people have to be careful too, like not feeding bread to ducks, for goodness sake. You have to learn. And you have to look at the trees that are growing well in your great big park. Hyde Park, for instance, say in London, most people know about Hyde Park. Look at what grows well there and use that. When the Victorians were doing it, they were all sort of, oh, let's have a specimen redwood or a superlative cedar and that sort of thing. Yeah, okay, possibly. Go and read The Hidden Life of Trees and you'll realise how putting a solitary specimen tree in a garden or a park leaves you with one very lonely tree. And trees actually have emotions, they actually care, and it's like putting a tree in solitary confinement. That's a bit of a stopper, isn't it? Makes you think. Which is one of the things my Uncle Jack used to say. That's the Woodsman uncle. And he knew. He knew because he'd done it all his life. He'd been brought up in it. His dad had done it before him. And the wisdom of the ages came through. And he gave me some of it. And I stuck to it. And it is what we now call rewilding. So we want to rewild, and yeah, I'm all for it. I'm an absolute rewilding freak. But let's try and do it right. So there's an old adage that we use a lot in the old ways and in the apprenticeship. You cannot change anything but yourself. But as you change yourself, you see the world change around you. Shall I do that again? You cannot change anything but yourself. But as you change yourself, you see the world change around you. Sort of a clue there as to how to start. The first thing you start with is rewilding yourself. This doesn't mean going back to the Stone Age and wearing furs and freezing to death because you're totally unused to living in the wild and you've got no idea how to eat or how to get any food or make a fire or make water drinkable or any of that kind of stuff. Okay, if you do bushcraft, you probably have got some idea, but relative to the 60 million people in Britain, that isn't very many people. And it isn't about that. It's about your inner attitudes. It's finding that wild self within you. And there's one in everybody. There is really. Finding that wild self. And making friends with it. And getting to know it. And at first, that wild self is going to frighten the hell out of you. Because it'll be sort of like, so what, you left your mobile phone behind? So what? We're stuck in the dark here. Why is anything awful going to happen? Why are you thinking that? It's actually 2 miles from your house. You are not a cripple. You could actually walk home. You know the way. Just because the car's got a puncture and you can't drive it, you could walk home from here. That's just 2 things that a lot of people are frightened about. And I've taken students out on Exmoor a lot over the past 30 years. And I take them up on Stretton Hills, but it's not quite the same because an awful lot of places on Exmoor, there is no signal for your mobile phone. There isn't one. There is usually a signal up in the Stretton Hills, but not on Exmoor. And you can be going down places and you'll catch a signal and then within 100 yards it's gone. So your mobile phone is about as much use, as my husband Paul says, as an ashtray on a motorbike. And I have had students really scared because their sat-nav didn't work, their mobile phone didn't work, and they didn't know what to do. They do get told. They do get taught. And, you know, they have at least been able to be frightened with me there and a reasonable amount of confidence that I'll get them home because I'll get me home. And as long as they stick to me, we'll all get home. But they really are frightened. I've had them be frightened, and a lot of people are. You go out at night and there's a noise in the bushes. Now, I get frightened if I'm in a town because I'm terrified it's some idiot bloke, some lunatic who's deciding they want to be friendly or they're on drugs or something or they want to rob me or whatever. I'm scared to death. But if I'm out here in the lanes, in the fields, in the woods around home, and there's a rustle, badger, fox, what's that? Where is it? Where? I can sit still, see if it'll come out. I'm not frightened. I'm really fascinated. It'd be great if the fox just came and he was only a yard away from me. Wow. If the badger came out and played and she got her cubs up and they all played. Wow. Hedgehog. An owl. I mean, there's an oak tree that I can sit in the base of. And I was doing that last November. in some of the good weather, and I'd go out in the moonlight. And right over my head, whoo! Like about 6 feet above my head, next branch up. And one of them, I normally wear a hat, because one of them actually shat on my hat. I felt very honoured. But they're there around me. Bats now, if I go out at night, pipistrelles, fantastic. And there are foxes come through. We see them, we smell them. And there are certainly badgers in the field that we can see and watch. And there's a set just over the hill that way. And I can go up there, and if I take some peanuts and throw them around, they'll come out and play. And they're not scary. I'm not terrified I'm going to be bitten to death by a badger. But most people are afraid of wildlife. They find trees a bit creepy at night. Yeah. Your wild self, your inner wild person, is the one who knows these things, who loves them, who wants to sit in the ash tree in the middle of the night, who wants to sit under the oak tree and listen to the owls. But you may not have met with that person, perhaps ever in this life as yet. Certainly not often. And they want to do things that everybody tells you, remember that one, everybody tells you are frightening and scary and risky, and you could get in trouble and it's dangerous. So getting in touch with your wild self is going to be quite hard work. It's going to be a lot of unlearning. It's going to be a lot of new learning, new stuff coming up. But this is how you rewild yourself. And you start to get used to the sense of nature. You start to notice different sorts of grass. And we've got a lot of lovely grasses in our natural world in Britain. There's a lot around here. So you go, oh, that one's different to that one. And then that one's different again. And so you start to get used to them, and you can remember the different shapes. And if you're really interested, you can start looking them up and giving them labels and names. That's not necessary. But noticing the difference is, you start to notice wildflowers. You start to notice that there are lots of different sorts of bumblebee with different colours, and that at different times, different bumblebees go to different flowers. So you become reconnected. You start noticing the world around you. The world that is much older than anything human, because all of it was there before we were. And so it's old, old, old. It's our ancestors. And as they always say in all forms of shamanism all around the world, it's your elders from whom you learn. And your elders are the trees and the animals and the fish and the birds and the rocks. And your wild self will want to know them, will be keen to know them, and will start pushing you to go and get to know them. Now, because this is difficult and because it's hard, and not everyone is able to do it on their own, in fact, very few people usually manage to do it on their own, this is what we do in the apprenticeship. We learn to ask. We learn that the first thing you do when you've got a bright idea is check it out with Mother Earth at the very least, or a tree, or your garden, or your animals, or whatever it is that you have the bright idea about. And with other parts of nature too. And with all the essences, with the spirits of all the things, the plants and the animals and the trees. And we learn how to speak with them and how to hear them and how to stop kidding ourselves that we're making it all up. That's hard, because we're all told that all the time. Oh, you're nuts, you're hearing voices in the head. You may be, but it's very unlikely. It's more likely that you're actually just hearing otherworld, the essences of things, the devas, the spirits. Your wild self will want to know those. Your wild self will be good at hearing those. And listening, this is a big thing. It's often said that most people, when they hear somebody talking, if they're in a group and they're going to have a chance to talk back and all that sort of thing and discuss, they're thinking up what they're going to say, not listening to the person who's speaking. So they haven't got a clue what she's actually said. And when they do hear it, then they try to translate it so that it fits into a box they already know. So they haven't got to learn anything new. They go, oh yeah, that's just a whatnot. All of those are useless. In fact, they're quite harmful to living and life, and certainly to rewilding and to rewilding yourself. You must learn to see what is really there, to hear what is really there, to hear what is really being said to you, probably by something that isn't human. All of that you learn. There are some very basic courses on the Atros tribe that give you the starter for 10 if that's all you want to do. But we do all that, and we do it very fast. We're actually going to start it just about now, and it'll be right going by the 1st of September. And the new students, the new apprentices, will be going through those courses with each other, with me, with regular Zooms. So go, what did you do with this exercise? And what happened? But did you go so and so? Did you ask such and such? Did you hear this? Did you notice that? All of which ups your game enormously. Instead of only having you, and you is going to be quite approving, the everyday you is going to be quite approving of everything you do, you're going to have your colleagues, your other fellow students going, but you didn't see that, and he didn't say that, and what happened here? And you have me doing it as well. And so it ups your game. It makes you quicker. It makes you understand more. It makes you know better. It gets the whole thing into your bones better. And the other problem with finding your wild self and learning to get to know your wild self is that there's going to be a whole load of habits and attitudes and things that you've always done that aren't going to be appropriate anymore, that will be past their sell-by date, and you've got to lose them. You've got to change. You've got to grow out of them, find a new way, which that'll come. But getting rid of the old stuff is really hard. How hard is it for you to clean out a cupboard? It's like that, only worse. But again, as part of the beginning of the apprenticeship, before you actually get into the lessons, we do a whole thing on composting, inner composting, alchemical composting, as we call it. Yes, it's there on the gold course, but when you do it with your fellow students and you share your results with them and talk it out with me and with Fiona on Zooms every week, it ups your game again. You're able to let go much more easily. You can, have the, oh, but I don't want to do that. Oh, but that really hurts. And then you'll get a load of stuff from your friends, just fellow students, which will help you climb out of that one. And you do it back for them, of course, as well. So we really help you find your wild self. And come midwinter, by midwinter, if you're on the apprenticeship, you will have a beginnings of quite a reasonable working relationship with your wild self. So then you can start actually doing and going out and really working with your wild self and learning about the wild land around you. And there's wild land around you, even if you live in the middle of a city. Oh yeah. There is wild always. Wild is deep in the soul, in the spirit of the land and of everything in the land. including you. But humans are really good at squashing it, and parents and schools do an amazingly good job at it, and so do universities most of the time. And then your job and your colleagues at work and all the rest of it, and the people you meet down the pub, everybody squashes it because they're not comfortable with it, as you weren't when you started. And if they're not comfortable with something, then they're really going to object, and they're going to push it away and squash you and try and stop you doing it. We've all been there. We've all had this happen. Which is why being in a group of people who are all working on the same thing is you're not trying to do it alone. You've got all the support of other people, and you can start to really rewild yourself, because the people around you, you've got a whole bunch of friends who are also doing their best to rewild themselves. So you're all helping each other and moving each other on and supporting each other through the bad bits. But the important thing, to go back to my theme, is that we need to rewild the whole of the earth, which means we need to rewild every human being on earth, or every human being needs to rewild themselves, because we can't rewild them. You have to do this yourself. Only you can change you. When you do change you, you change the world around yourself. Remember that. So the thing is, we need to rewild ourselves. We need to change our attitudes. We need to query and think, and not just believe what human beings say, but go back to the land, to the plants, to the trees, to the rocks, to the stones, to the animals, to the insects, the birds, the fish, all of them. We need to go back to them and say, if I do so and so, what's going to happen for you? That's a good question. One that doesn't get asked in rewilding circles, doesn't get asked in eco, agro, culture, whatever stuff. There are very, very few of them who go to their field and say, I was thinking of putting you to wheat this year. How do you feel about that? Do you know any farmers who do that? I actually know one. One. Yeah. Can you see how things would be so different if everybody did that? Can you see how the likelihood of us having got into this climate disaster that we're in, the likelihood of us actually getting into that would have been remote if people went along and did things like asking their field, I was thinking about putting you to wheat this year. How do you feel about that? You don't think so? Okay, well, what would you like to grow? What would you like to do? Okay, we'll do that. Is that a brave new world? Is that a world worth living in? I think so. No, I don't know whether I'll ever see it in my lifetime. I've done a lot of my lifetime already, so some of you have got more lifetime in front of you. You may. But that doesn't matter. I want it there for the earth. I would love to see it. Of course I would. But I'm going to do it whether I see it or not, because the earth needs it, the plants need it, the animals need it, the atmosphere needs it. The whole solar system needs it, actually. And yes, we get that far. Takes us into the Rainbow Warriors course out from the apprenticeship, but yes, we get into that. A world where everyone asked everything. Oh, but we'd never get anything done. There'd be no progress. There'd be no profit. No, there wouldn't. No progress, no profit. What's progress? ripping up more forests, planting more wheat, managing to screw more cattle into a field. Yet another forest dies because we need beans and potatoes and rice. I don't want that. I don't really think any of you do either. But you have to think about it. And it's your wild self that will know this. It's your wild self that will help you think this. It's your wild self you need to get in touch with. If you want to get in touch with your wild self and you'd like me to help you, you can always message me on Facebook. My email is around on the websites. Love to see you. You take care, guys. I'll see you next Monday. Bye for now.